Hello, welcome to the October 28th, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test, make sure everything is coming through, and then we will go ahead and get started. Bear with me just for a moment. Hello, welcome to the... Okay, everything sounds fine on my monitoring computer. Excuse me. My name is Greg Undo. I'm the host of the live stream. I work as an employee for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products. And I'm presenting from the United States outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. If you are watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself. Let me clear my throat, sorry. And tell us where you are living and where you are from. It's always fascinating to see people from all over the world. And if you've not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or simply email questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. We'll go through all the questions chronologically as asked. And a couple things when asking questions, if you could remember to indicate which version of Cubase you're running, whether it's LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version number, such as 10, 10.5, 11, or 12, and which operating system. That information is helpful. If you don't see an immediate response to your question, if we could refrain from asking the question, I will be behind depending on the number of questions are getting asked. So I may be 20 to 30 minutes behind. If we could refrain from asking the same question over and over again, that would be appreciated. If we should have all the topics covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field with timestamps, so you could refer to that. And if you wanted to search for topics have been covered in previous live streams, it's over 21,000 questions. You could go to cubaseindex.com and be able to search there. And Jan from Stockholm has been kind enough to create that website for us. Also, we have two people that serve as moderators. We have Agent K and Jazz Dude. They're not official Steinberg employees. They just kind of do it to make it a better community. So I want to give special thanks to them. One other great resource of information that's available is the Cubase Nation Discord. So check that out. And Jazz Dude does a tremendous amount of work compiling relevant information to the Steinberg community. So we want to give special thanks to Jazz Dude for his efforts with that. It is the last live stream of the month. And usually we do a Zoom meetup. I'm currently in between Zoom licenses, so I think we're going to maybe push it off a week. I think my office is close to getting a Zoom license allocated for me. So maybe we could do it next Friday. So I just wanted to let everyone know about that. So we'll try to maybe push off the Zoom social meetup till next Friday. So let me know if that's a problem for anyone. And with that, we will go ahead and begin. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we see Peter checking in from Montreal. We have Uno Memento from Finland. We have Filter Freak, and we have, all right, Drums Powwow Clark checking in from Helsinki. Thanks for joining us. We have Benny from Sweden. All right, so we have a question from Dallas LaRue. Says, I heard someone say that things should always be recorded at 48K now, not 44.1. Is that true? There's no disadvantage to using 48K. So you could use either sample rate is fine. If your ultimate, delivery medium is going to be an audio CD, people work at 44.1 still. I know a lot of composers still do all of their music at 44.1. And even though they're kind of working with video, and you always associate 48K with video. So I know, like we had someone had asked a question and wanted me to reach out to Zed's team, like what sample rate they use for their productions. They're still doing everything at 44.1. So either sample rate is fine. Just make sure, just think of where you deliver to. There's probably more momentum towards 48K, but I always tell people if your audio doesn't sound good, it's not the sample rate's fault. All right, wonderful to see Jazz Dude on. All right, and we have Demir G checking in from Houston, Texas. All right, and we have Stefan from Sweden. All right, and we have Luca checking in from Germany, from Munich, I believe. Thanks for being with us today. All right, so I see. All right, so we see, hi Greg, how can I map an assignable button on my control surface to do something like open the mixer? Thank you. Okay, so if you're doing it from, depending on your control surface, so a lot of times if it's a Mackie control, you could come over here and have like user buttons. And then if we wanted to open a mixer, we could go to devices and then just come over here and say mixer. And then your user A button could do functions. There's also ways of doing this in a generic remote. So I will come over to a generic remote, and here we could say anything we want to assign the input and output to particular of your generic remote. So if it's just transmitting kind of generic MIDI information, we could say, okay, we want fader 1, and you could probably just hit the button with the learn button turned on. And again, go to devices, to VST mixer. And, or we could just, we'll say, okay, we'll come here, command to devices to mixer. And that way, anytime we hit a particular function, we could open the mixer. If you wanted to use the new MIDI remote capabilities in Cubase 12, I could just take a particular button here. So let's say I wanted to assign this button. So if you made kind of a MIDI remote script, or if you have a controller that's automatically assigned to, you could just double click on an object. And at this point, we could go to the mapping assistant, and we'll go to key commands, devices, mixer, and we could apply that mapping. So as soon as I wanted to come over and open up my mixer, I could just hit that particular button and the mixer will open and close. So let me know if that works for you, Matt. All right. Oh, I'm sorry, that was from Matt Elder as opposed to Matt Ellison. So. All right. All right, so we have Antonin checking in from Czech Republic. All right, so we have a question. Is it possible to take 4 separate tracks and put them in one track and get it to lanes in Cubase 12? Okay, so let me just take this over. I'll just take this project and take 4 tracks and put them into separate lanes. Okay, so I'm going to create a new audio track. I'll just make this mono to match. And let's open up. Let's say I just want to copy these kind of on top of each other. So let's say okay, let me see if there's I may have a function on, sorry. Let me just deactivate a preference. All right, so I'm going to go to editing, and I'm just going to choose to not have delete overlaps on. All right, so let's try this again. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's say I wanted to take this and let's say drag these over top of each other. And then when we go to lanes, we can now just take the different takes and drag them to individual lanes, just kind of like that. And let's see if we have a lane open. If we just drag it to, as we drag it to the lane's going to place it on the top, and then you could just simply move it down, and then you could have multiple tracks all on different lanes. And if you're afraid of, as you move, that it's going to get out of time, just hold down. So let's say if I wanted to keep this in the same exact time, I could just hold down the Alt or just hold down the Control or Command key, and depending on which direction you moved it, so if I move this vertically first, then I could hold down the Control or Command key, and that will restrain its direction from editing. So give that a shot. I'm just going to adjust my microphone here real quick. Give me a second. All right. All right, so Mark Winslow is saying aloha from Hawaii. We have Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo, California. We have Soren from Sweden also. All right, so we see John Costigan checking in from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Jazz Dude just says the Discord runs on a lot of helpers. It's only me who started it, and still add more video links every day. So we appreciate your efforts with that, Jazz Dude. All right, and we have Mixing Tips checking in from Macedonia. All right, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. Can you play a VST synth and have it reversed in real time rather than bounce the track? Thanks. So it's not going to reverse it in real time, so it has to know what is going to happen afterwards. You know, if you wanted a sound to be reversed, that's one thing. But if you play a melodic figure of a scale, it can't reverse. You know, if we have something, you know, where I have my synth bass and I play, it can't reverse it in real time because it doesn't know how it's going to end. If you wanted to, you know, take particular, you know, so if we have, let's say, a quick, you know, so if we're doing this, and then let's say I just wanted to put it in step mode here quickly. Here, I'll just put this to quarter notes and just put some notes in. All right, so when we look at, you know, particular MIDI notes, you know, so it's not going to be able to reverse it in real time, but you could take the MIDI notes themselves and choose to, you know, reverse the MIDI notes if you wanted to do that. But if you wanted like the sound to be reversed, a lot of times you can come up to different, you know, depending on the instrument itself. So let's say if I wanted to take like this snare, that we could go to, I think we could do reversing right here into the sample editors every time I, you know, so depending on if you want to have samples that were reversed, you could take it into like the sampler or groove agent and be able to reverse it, but it's not going to be able to reverse it in real time because it doesn't know how it's going to end. So I hope that makes sense. All right, so we see from Demir G says, I know the subject must have been covered, but we'll ask anyway. Cubase 12 Pro, Auto Tune, and VariAudio. So I'm not sure what the question is. So, you know, if you have Cubase 12 Pro, you could obviously, you know, there's VariAudio. So if we wanted to just drag an audio file in, at this point we could do, you know, if we go to our VariAudio, we could just have it automatically, you know, do the analysis, and I'll find. I feel the way. So now if I wanted to just double click here, and I think that the beauty of VariAudio is that it is completely integrated in with the system. So if you wanted to come directly over here, all of your undo history, we could have it automatically quantize pitches based on the scale assistant that could be utilized within the project. But being able to do, like, you know, simple tuning and say, okay, I want to take all these notes and, you know, change the tuning, or if I wanted to straighten the curve, and you'll have kind of different modes. So we could see all of our smart modes. So instead of going into kind of like a different editing environment, everything can be done very quickly here. So if you wanted to kind of truncate notes or start them later, or just adjust your pitch. So if you wanted to go up, so you could do, you know, all sorts of stuff like that as well. But if there's a specific point on VariAudio that you have or question, let me know, and I'd be happy to kind of answer it for you. I don't have a license of Auto-Tune installed, and I, you know, personally, I haven't really used Auto-Tune since VariAudio has been released. So, all right, wonderful to see Brian Sawyer checking in from Beulahville, North Carolina, and we have Gareth on from Spain. Thanks for joining us. All right, we see Cubase X on. Okay, so we have a question from John M. Tobin. Says, Melodyne as ARA, when I reopen Cubase, the changes in Melodyne have not saved. Any ideas? So I haven't come across that. I mean, I have a license of Melodyne 4 and all the, you know, I tested that recently, and it seemed like all the changes in the project were saved. So, but like if I wanted to take, you know, this particular, so I'm not sure if you're, you know, how you're doing. So if you're doing the extension directly here, so say, you know, here's a spectral layers, which is running under ARA. So now when I double click, we could just have this automatically launch in. And then if I wanted to just, you know, save a particular, let's say if I cut this out, so if we wanted to apply, you know, different things, that those are saved within the project. But if you could let me know which version of Cubase, because, you know, and then once you have the layer, you could just choose to make the track extension permanent. But I haven't run into any problems with Melodyne, but I don't have, I think I have on my personal computer, like version 4, not the latest version as well. All right, John Costigan wants people to press the like button, and Gareth has called me Greg the Revelator. So, all right. All right, great to see Gil Lewis on. He says, I was wondering for a long time, is there a way to create a macro that adds a specific third-party plugin to an insert using a shortcut? So I don't think that there is that we could apply a particular plugin as an insert, but if you wanted to process a particular plugin, so I don't know of a way of a macro of saying, go to insert slot 3 and turn this plugin on. But if you wanted to, let's say, process a particular plugin, if you go to key commands, and then if we go under process plugin, that all of your plugins could show up here. So let's say, okay, I want to take this loop and process it through Destroyer. That, we could just have a key command set up to process, but it doesn't load it into a particular insert slot. So I don't know of a way of saying, go to insert slot 3 and, insert plugin X. So I haven't found a way to do it. I'm not saying that there isn't one, but I don't know of one. But if you wanted to get the sound on, you could process the individual plugin, or save it as once you have a plugin chain that maybe you like. Like, let's say, okay, I wanted to use a particular channel strip, or every plugin I wanted a multi-band compressor that you could then right click and save a track preset. And then if you wanted to just come over to your media, we could say, okay, I just want to go to my presets, and you can say track presets, audio, and then if you wanted to apply that track preset or just drag it to the particular track, you could do that. But I don't know a way to say insert to put this plugin in via macro or project logical editor. Sorry about that. All right, so we see Benny is just mentioning Jerry Lee Lewis has just passed away, so it's sad to hear. All right, so we have a question from Patrick Manuel A. Says, hi Greg, happy to be in live. I want color in key editor, like in color and editor. The notes that I recorded should be in color in the key roll. All right, so if you, let's say I have MIDI track here, and our MIDI track color is kind of a light blue. So if we wanted to record directly in this editor, so I'll just enable record, and let's say while we're doing this, I'm just going to put some notes in. All right. So, and I have auto quantize on, so sorry about that. So let's say I have notes here. So if we go to the colors, we could say colorize based on the part as opposed to the velocity, and then we'll see the colors change based on the part. And so just make sure it's right. It says I want color in the key editor, like in the key editor. The notes I recorded should be in the color in the key roll. Okay, so just make sure I understand it. So I want color in key roll in editor, like in editor, the notes that I've recorded should be in the color in the key roll. So let me know, like, if you want, so there's different coloring options here, or if you want it to be colored here, or, it'll default to velocity, but maybe if you could rephrase the question, Patrick, maybe I could help you better. All right, so we have a question. Can you show a quick setup of the Nektar keyboard to use for automation on whatever Cubase 12 using the new mapping thing. All right, so we come over here. Let's define a new MIDI remote. So I'll come over here. We will click on the plus sign, and we'll say, okay, let's come here to a Nektar controller. All right, and we want to, I'll just call this P4. We can it'll give me, my name is script editor. So I say, okay, let's make our, we're going to choose the panorama, the correct MIDI in and the MIDI out port. And then we'll say, let's create a MIDI control surface. So if I wanted to, create different knobs or sliders, we could kind of mimic the actual buttons on the Nektar controller. So what I'm going to do now is just move different controllers. So I have circular knobs. So I'm just moving these controllers. And now what I want to do is to say we want to almost mimic the physical layout of the keyboard. So I'll just... And let's say I have a number of drum pads. So at this point, we can say, okay, I want a trigger pad. And I just want to assign these trigger pads to different functions. And we can see that as I just hit the knob or the button on the Nektar, that it's going to populate. So let's click here. Okay, so, and let's say, we could add different buttons for transport. So let's say, okay, I wanted to come here. Let's make it like one row big. Okay, so, when we look at this, and I'll make it larger. So we just kind of can make these, map to different functions. So if I want this to be play, I could hit the button and that will select it. We could now at this point, if I wanted to go to transport, so we say, okay, this button, I want it to be play. And so what I could do is a lot of the functions, I could just say pick up for MIDI remote mapping. And then, okay, so we'll say, okay, it's going to go on to this particular button. And then we could apply mapping. So if I wanted this to be record, I could now at this point right click on record, pick up for MIDI remote mapping, apply the mapping. So now I could assign these particular functions directly to, so I'll come over here. So as we would hit our different functions, so I have that as my active controllers. Again, just right click, pick up for MIDI remote, apply the mapping, hit the record button, that becomes active. Right click here, pick up for, apply the mapping. So now when I hit play, record, that will do it. Now the other functions, if I wanted to assign these for like, we could go to focus quick controls. Like say I want this for quick control 1, and we could just double click. Let's move the knob or select the event in the software. We could assign this for quick controls. And let's say, okay, this would be quick control 4. Let's say quick control 5, 6. So, and let's say our previous example, like I want this knob to open up the mixer. We could come over here and go to the extended functions and say, okay, I want to go to my key commands and any of the mappable functions. We can just come right over here and just say devices, mixer. So, and now every time I hit this button, it will open up the mixer. So now as I just kind of come over here, we'll close the mapping assistant. And now I could just execute these particular defined controls. It's a weird MIDI patch. All right. So And that's how you could set it up. So you could set up multiple controllers to do multiple different aspects. So let me know if that's helpful. All right. All right, so we see a question from Chaser. Hello, Greg. For example, if I'm in C, is there a way on the MIDI to highlight only the notes that are in C? All right, so let's say if I'm here and I have just a number of notes. So let me just take this out of step entry mode. So if you wanted to, you could go... so let's say we defined ours in our scale assistant. We could say, okay, I want to use the editor scale. So you say, okay, I want this to be in the key of C. And then if you wanted to only, if you come here, you can say, show only pitches from the scale assistant. So that will hide every note that's not there. We could probably also or we show only pitches that are present, or show all pitches. If you wanted to go to your MIDI, and let's go to a logical editor, we could probably say something like select type is equal to note, and we'll say value 1 is let's see if we could. So, we could say value 1 is C. We could insert, or value 1 is equal to so we can say note is equal to D, and you could create just different logical editor presets, where it's only going to be in particular scales. So you could do stuff like that, so you can say, okay, select notes C or D or E or F or G or C. But let me know if that's helpful and what you want it to accomplish. All right, and we have Razel. Great to see you again from Denmark. We missed you recently. All right. All right, so I see from DJ Ride, how do you time a Christmas, looks like a Christmas tree, MIDI to a 4/4 metronome grid? Sometimes it's 2/3 or 1/3, etc. So I'm not sure if it's a Christmas tree or a Christmas MIDI file. And when you say sometimes it's 2/3, 1/3, so I'm not sure if it's triplets or not. But if you have a MIDI file, and let's say if you're trying to figure out what the tempo of it is, let me see if I still have this in my recent projects. Yeah. So if it's, I'm not sure what 1/3 or 2/3 is, but maybe it's, 1/4 or 3/4 times or 6/8 time. But, if you wanted to figure out what the tempo of your file is, so let's say if I want to take this, here what you could do is just kind of select the project, and we'll go to tempo detection. So if we listen to, And this will kind of figure out like what the beat is. So break it down by beat, and then you have to kind of manually count, and you could go to a signature track, which you could right click. So I'm not sure if by 1/3, 2/3, if you mean like 3/4 time, but you know, where you have 3 beats in a measure, like, you know, I'm sure there's a number of Christmas carols that are in 3/4 time. So maybe you could. So a lot of times you would have to kind of manually figure out, kind of, you know, just listening to it and counting it, and say, okay, this I want to be in 3/4 time. And then you could see all the divisions, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding. Right, my chat just jumped, so let me just find my place. All right. All right, so we see AJ Soundbites is a very new Cubase user here. Been using for about a month now. Loving the learning curve. Stuff is mind-blowing. So much more to learn. It's great to have you on the live stream, and feel free to ask any questions. All right, we have Enchanter saying hi. All right, so we see, hi Greg, with proper gain staging being so vital to achieving a proper mix, any plans to facilitate this? So DBS / I guess Lewis, or maybe LUFS, I would assume, can easily be measured without having to constantly insert a VU meter between inserts. You know, so a lot of times, you know, if you kind of just, you know, you could always have your meter here present. So, you know, if you want to see your loudness meter, so you don't have to insert it between different tracks. So, but let's say if I was doing this on a multi-track project, you know, it's really all you have to do is, so say if I just have my meter going, you know, so now you see everything, but if I just solo a track, we could see what the level is. So let's say, okay, I want to come to guitar track. So like as tracks are just soloed, I can come here. So let's say I want to go to my snare top. And if I wanted to now apply dynamics on it, so let's say I want to go to my insert. And let's say, okay, I want to come to my compressor. So you could have one global meter, and as you just solo tracks, you could see kind of instantly what's going on, whether you want to see it in dBs or loudness units. So as we start up here. So if I want to see the whole mix or just solo different tracks, we can get an idea of, you know, I don't think there's any need to insert it between each, you know, insert a meter between each stage. So, and I mean, you can do that, but it's kind of a long process. And I think if you do kind of basic gain staging, that, you know, you don't have to necessarily do that on a track by track basis. Just be aware of the gain changes that you're making. And then you could always just keep the meter open. And if you want to see both of these meters simultaneously, you could just come over and activate a separate control room. And then at this point, you could just choose to have, like, you know, a master meter, but let's say I want my loudness meter, and we could always have this open as a separate floating window, or use like the supervision plugin as well. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Question: how come that some WAV files in MediaBay doesn't play preview? So I'm not sure if it's like could be, so a lot of times if you're having some files play and others not. So here, as I'm going to preview, my different events, I can preview all of these. So the one thing I think that that could prevent that from happening. So if you don't hear anything, then I would go over, to your studio and go to audio connections and make sure that you have the control room connected, since these aren't necessarily routed to any particular outputs. So, but when we, if some of the files aren't playing, maybe, and others are, maybe check the sample rate to make sure that it's not like a 96K file in a 44.1K project, something like that. All right, so we see Soren just says, Greg, we found a bug in Wavelab Pro detect errors in the past. Latest patch fixes it. Can you demo the detect errors in Wavelab Pro a bit to the different sensibilities? I actually forgot to get the Wavelab Pro patch, so maybe I could show it on Tuesday. If you want to just ask me then I should have the latest patch installed. Sorry about that. I should have gotten that taken care of. All right, so we have a question. Is there a way to reduce highlights in Cubase? In Cubase, white words are too bright/white, such as track names. I want to reduce it. All right, so let's see if there's any way of doing that. So it might be fixed, just for kind of legibility, but let's see if there's any preferences. So I think the text might be fixed. Let me just see if this... No, it's not going to change. Yeah, so I think the default text is that way, so it is legible. I think people would complain if it was darker and that it kind of stands out with the contrast, so it is easier to read. But let me just... see if there's anything in here. Yeah, so I don't know of anything off the top of my head that would allow you to kind of change the color of that. So sorry about that. All right, so we have Mr. O checking in from Cali, Colombia. We have Nick checking in from London. Let's see, John Koskins just saying maybe control the contrasts for this. Let me just see. If it's for the text, let me just see if we can. Let's see if we do the grid overlay intensity, if that makes. So we could do it for like different events, but maybe someone else, if they know of a way, can chime in. All right, sorry about that again. All right, so we see from Patrick Emmanuel, coloring keys. Yes, Greg, the piano roll, which is located on the left side, should be colored. So if you wanted this to be colored, like with the track, so I think a lot of people, that would be probably more confusing to people looking as the piano roll as a reference. So I would think that should be kind of two colors, you know, with clearly delineated between, you know, the white and black keys. So I think that makes sense to, you know, because that's a kind of a universal paradigm of what's going on, as opposed to like having these keys be colored like that. So, but I'll pass it along as a suggestion. All right, we have PZ136 on. Wishing everyone a happy Friday. All right, so we see from Peter just asking, where do I find MIDI remote scripts need for NI? So generally it's like, you know, the concept is that the controller companies will be releasing these scripts. But if you go to the Steinberg forums, and I'm sure Jazz Dude probably has a link to it, yeah, and I see that he's posted it, that a lot of users have compiled scripts that they've made. You know, it's really not that hard to make one as well. So, but, you know, check in the link, and people are uploading their user-created MIDI remote scripts there. Okay, so we see from Mr. O says, I don't know why, but my MIDI script just stopped working. The MIDI controller works. I can make music with it, but the controls mapped out by Cubase don't work. I can see the map and the buttons. So check to make sure, you know, because it's easy for some controllers to get set up as remote controls for different devices. So if you go to your studio setup from your studio menu, so go to studio setup, make sure that it's not being utilized for a generic remote or a Mackie control or other types of control surface capabilities. So, you know, sometimes if it's being utilized in a generic remote and the same button is being utilized in others, that could create a conflict. So make sure that you don't have the same MIDI ports here assigned for a Mackie control or generic remote, in addition to the remote, the MIDI remote script. All right, so we have Lord Schrader checking in. All right, so we have Royal Kneebag says, great, thanks for the Nektar explanation. Love how I can have an issue and have it explained right away. Love the show, so great, glad it's helpful. All right, so I just see a comment from DJ Ride. It just says MIDI file. Let me see if it's in reference to something earlier. All right, so just went back a bit, and all right, so this is, I think, with the how to do a Christmas MIDI file to a 4/4 metronome grid. So when you say sometimes it's 2/3 / 1/3, let me know what you mean by that. It's from DJ Ride. So if it's a MIDI file, or if you need to, if you need to play back in a different, like a different player, like a hardware sequencer or something like that. Okay, Mr. O says he was like number 50. So yeah, if you do learn a tip or trick or find this live stream helpful, make sure you do hit the like button. All right. So we see from Patrick Manuel says, thank you, Greg. It helped. How many tracks can Cubase hold? Is it possible to do a heavy Hollywood projects on Windows with Cubase on it? Do you know someone who did? So, pretty much, if you look at, Hans Zimmer's projects are all done on Windows. I think a lot of film composers are doing stuff on Windows. And, if you watch Junkie XL's videos, he's doing, 3,000. I think he's 3,200 tracks. I think Danny Lux, who's more TV composer, he used to be in California. He's moved recently to Nashville. He's like 3,400 tracks in his template. So there's lots of big projects being done on Windows. So obviously worked okay for Hans Zimmer, who got the Oscar last year. All right, so we have a question. I have a Behringer X-Touch, and the faders when automating in real time are very chunky. If that makes sense, lots of noise. Is there a way to make it smoother with the automation line? So check out to see if like when you write automation and you look at the automation that's been written. So let's say if I'm here and I'll just go ahead and write, some automation. So I'll write automation here and I have a CC 121. So all right, so let's say I'll just come to the bass part here and let's enable automation. But as soon as you see the automation that's been written, see if the automation itself is smooth. You always get the smoothest automation kind of just drawing it in. Now, how the fader reacts to the automation as it's kind of interpolating between different values, it's not going to affect the way it sounds. But if the motor isn't as precise, then it may seem noisy and it may seem like it's imprecise. But don't really go by what the fader is doing. Look at the actual automation line in Cubase and see if that's, and listen to the file itself. So if you have a way of bypassing the motors. So sometimes I've seen people that think that the automation is coarse because the motors on their control surface are coarse. But, what's the data that's being written in may not, may be fine. So, and if it's a coarse motor on the control surface itself, it's really kind of outside of Cubase's purview. It's outside of our capabilities to really handle, but just check to actually see what automation is being written and what automation looks like and what it sounds like in the project as opposed to the control surface. We see Jazz Dude just saying Junkie XL's Mad Max template was 4,500 tracks. All right, we see from AJ Soundbite says, thank you for the live stream. Very new last month. Near the end of September, your live streams helped a lot. Thanks for hosting these. It's exactly why we do them. So help you get up to speed with your Cubase faster. All right, so we see from Patrick Manuel A says, Greg, how to do comping with VST without playback while comping and after selecting takes unable to apply glue. If I apply it is not playing back. You gave me a suggestion, it worked, and I want to see how you do. Okay, so let's say I'll just jump to this project. Okay, so let's say I have a Rhodes patch here. Let me activate the project. That would help. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and solo this track, and I'll just put it into, and I'll switch my MIDI record mode here. So let's say while we do cycled, we could do stacked record. So let's say if I'm here, and I'll just kind of do, like, play some low notes. So now I have all of my different takes, and I look at my lanes. What I could do now at this point is choose to just say, okay, I want that note from that one, those notes from there, and this. So when we play it back, we should have the high note. All right, so... and once we're here, let's say if I wanted to glue these together, let's see what happens. So let's say, okay. So at this point, if we had the comp, so let's say we listen to it. Let me just say we have this. And then I think if we select this, that we go to MIDI and we choose bounce MIDI. And then we have one part. So instead of gluing it, what you want to do at that point is go to MIDI and then choose to bounce MIDI. And then that will kind of clean up all the different takes for you. So... and we also had kind of a question that was mailed in, like in this case, how to do deleting of overlaps of other data. So if I wanted to, go to preferences and go to editing, that we can see our delete overlaps. So hit apply. So if I wanted to get rid of the other parts at this point, as we would resize events, that would automatically just delete the particular events underneath, just like that. So where there wasn't anything going on, we could just have, and that would delete our different parts. And if I had this for audio, let's say if I had a drum loop, for instance, let me just find a quick... so if I want to take a different file and drag it over top with delete overlaps active, as soon as this event, without delete overlaps, what's going to happen is I'll turn this off. That these two events are kind of merged on top of each other. And then you could pick which one is kind of the active part. But if these were set to, again, work in delete overlaps. At this point, we'll just say apply, and as I drag this over, that will delete the beginning of the second part. If I drag this over the top of the other one, that will delete the end of that, as opposed to having overlapping events. So that's a way to use delete overlaps. But if you want to do it for MIDI comping and kind of instead of gluing it together, just do, just go to your MIDI menu and choose to, bounce MIDI. So right there. So let me know if that helps. All right, so we have Kenny Jobson on, so thanks for joining us. All right, so we have the artist known as Love checking in from New York. Thanks for being on. And he wants people to hit the like button. All right, wonderful to see Vinny Sabatino from Orlando, Florida. All right, Gareth mentions that if you whack the like button, I get a free tickle every time. Yes. I have to give the number of likes to my wife after a live stream. So, all right. All right, so we see Demir G just says about AJ Soundbites comment. He says he seconds it as well. He just switched from Studio One. Very grateful to Greg and the others for helping on a platform like this. We're glad to be able to help. All right, so we see from Rumley says, hi, I have removed Hallian Sonic SE in my project, but it's still loading Hallian Sonic SE on project startup. Is Hallian Sonic SE loaded other places than in the track list where I already removed it? So, check if you go to your VST, tab here on the Right Zone MediaBay, you might have... like if we added an instrument track, I'll just start from scratch here. So just to show this, so if we add an instrument track, so let's say we'll go add for Hallian Sonic SE. All right, so we see that it gets added here, but if we add it as an instrument rack, so we'll create, and let's say, so you may just kind of see the MIDI track that's routed out, and then if we delete this track, so let's remove the selected tracks, it's still in the project. So it could be that if it was added as a MIDI track that's being routed out and you delete the MIDI track, that could still keep the particular instance of Hallian Sonic SE. So let's see if I delete this. So it could still be in the project. All right, and if we come here and then, so look in your instrument rack, and then if you choose no VST instrument, then the instrument return channels will then be kind of erased as well. So it could be that it's loaded in the instrument rack as opposed to an instrument track. All right, my chat field just jumped. So we have a question. Greg, what is the reason you use a PC-based system for your personal rig versus Mac-based? I'm not for like with my personal money, I'm not a huge fan of Apple ecosystems, and Personally, I mean, I go back and forth. I have a Mac for work so that I could go and run both, both Mac and Windows on it. So, if necessary. But, for like when I buy stuff for myself, I'm not a huge fan personally of Apple products. I understand how to work them. But, for my own personal investments, I would, I kind of like having a lot more flexibility and not having to, be constrained in my choice of operating systems or having to update hardware because of maybe business models that, don't really extend. So that's why and I've always been kind of a PC guy. So I don't think I've ever actually bought a Mac computer myself. And maybe I bought an iPod once and didn't use it that much. So, and my PC system works great. So, all right. So we see from the Heartbreak Time Machine that the like button has been smashed. We have Camille checking in from the Czech Republic, and Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. We missed you on the last live stream, so everyone's going to need double ice cream from Michael Teams. And those who may have missed the announcement earlier, so I'm in between Zoom licenses, so we're going to try to have the Zoom social meetup next Friday. Sorry about that. I've been trying since October 1st to get the Zoom license set up, so Zoom wasn't so helpful in transferring it to a corporate account that our office has, so apologize for that. All right, so we see a question from Andrew Jobson. Hi, Greg. When clicking and dragging in a ruler in order to move left and right and zoom in and out, is there a setting to not cause the project cursor to also move when doing this? Okay, so let me just go to a different project here. It could be more apparent. Okay, so let's say if I want, so a lot of times when we do this, we could kind of zoom in and out and navigate, and we see that the playhead is moving. So I think it's one of the modifier keys. So if we wanted to zoom while holding, we just figure out the modifier key for it. But I think that if you hold down, yeah, so if you hold down Shift and zoom, that the playhead, so let's say my playhead is at, let's say 4844. So now I'm going to hold down the Shift key and zoom. And you notice that I could zoom independently of the playhead position. So just hold down the Shift key, and then the playhead is not going to be modified. So as we do this, just hold down the Shift key, and that won't. So right now, without the Shift key, we could notice that the play position, the playhead position will change. Now when I hold down the Shift key, I could zoom independently, and it's not going to affect the playhead position. So hold down Shift and then kind of drag from the top ruler, and then that should help you with that. All right, so you see from Jazzy Lamel, hey Greg, do you have a preferred vocal chain that you use on your input? If so, what is it? So, I'm not often, if it's, I try to keep things as clean as possible. So when I'm recording, I try to make the source sound great, with the microphone, figuring it's only going to sound better with additional processing. So, I'm a bass player, so when I do my bass recording, I don't stack it up with like 12 different plugins. I find that sometimes it's kind of muddies it up a bit. So generally, like as I'm tracking, I will, just try to get the source as good as possible and sounding as great as possible without kind of relying on processing. And it's maybe kind of a more of an old school approach for that. But for, and I just wanted, so, and like, for my vocal chains, generally, I take it as, a particular, I don't want to use the same vocal chain on every project. So I'll try to do stuff where it's just going to be, required for, what's needed for the song, as opposed to this is, my vocal chain I'm going to use on everything. I've seen lots of engineers kind of fall into that trap. But I'll play just kind of like a vocal chain here on a project that a lot of people seem to like, just to give you kind of an idea. So let's say, just hide this track real quick. So often keep things very simple. So like my vocal chain for this, just a little touch of EQ. So if I were to bypass the EQ, I have just a tiny bit of compression. So if I bypass that, I have, and a little bit of reverb. So this is
our musical history laid out on the floor. I've got to choose.
So just a little touch of EQ.
What's mine and what's yours? Because now you're asking Beatles or Stones. Something about that just sounds so wrong.
So, whenever you can, just try to get, use different mics. Make sure the singer has a great mic technique. All those things can, but I don't think anyone really cares if you don't capture the great performance. So, it's like technical problems with a passionate performance will always win. So over, just an amazing vocal chain with a lackluster, no vibe performance. So, but I don't, so I just do really basic things and try not to do too much processing. And I find that works well. All right, so Patrick Manuel, just as clarification from the previous live stream, says bouncy notes makes notes bounce according to selected values. Quarter notes, like 8, like double bars, 16, 4 measures. So, any time that we would just kind of take a, let's say if I wanted to take, this mellotron, so if we wanted to, put a delay on it, we could come over here and just say, okay, I want this to be, even if we do just a simple stereo delay, we could say, okay, I want this to be like as we would hit a particular note that it's going to just find the correct patch. Okay, so the mellotron. So now when I hit, so if I wanted to be quarter notes, so say I wanted this to be dotted quarter notes in the right, So, any number of delays can do that for, and if you wanted to go really crazy with that, you could get into like the multi-tap delay. So let's say at this point, I will go to, we could just go to, so say if I wanted to take just the voice here, and I'll just go to the sends, and let's say we'll add an effects channel to send 2, and let's put on the multi-band or the multi-tap delay, and this will allow you to, and let me just set it for stereo here. Sorry about that. So we'll make this stereo.
What is too late to start a fight? Take the records that you like. Please stop asking Beatles or Stones.
So, but if you wanted to go,
just leave it alone. Oh.
and each of these effects could be, timed.
Used to love when I played Hey Jude.
With different filters, overdrives, and taps.
You were out of tune. Whatever you did, that was okay.
So it sounds like it's really just a delay that you're, so if you wanted to come over here, you could, have for, different processing for each of the taps. And if you wanted to, play the taps and play it in time and have individual effects on each of the taps, then you could kind of, you could spend a weekend just kind of diving into the multi-tap delay. So it's a pretty phenomenal plugin. But thank you for the clarification. All right, Mike Rivera, great to see you on. He's wishing everyone a happy Halloween. My son is excited. He's at 9 years old, so he's perfect Halloween age. All right, wonderful to see Pablo on. So we have the whole Hot Mess band on. All right, wonderful to see Pablo. It's always better when Pablo is on. All right. All right. So we see a question from Best Screen Jesus. How do you reset many audio clips with different volume adjustments? I saw the video of setting it to 0, but they have to be the same values. I want to release the clips all to 0. Is this possible? So if you have a number of tracks in your mixer, so let's say I'll select all these, and I want them, let's say I go to Q-Link, and we can put this to absolute mode. So now if I hold down Control and click, we could take all of the tracks, and I'll just do this I'll show it on an audio track here, which will make more sense. All right, so let's say we are looking at our mix console here. So you could always kind of hold down Control and click, and that will set it to its kind of default value. So let's say if I have all of these tracks, and I now set this to absolute so that they'll all be going to kind of the same absolute value. So I'm going to hit Control or Command on one of these, and now they'll all kind of go down to 0, just kind of like that. So if we're just to come here, so if you want to set it all to 0, you could just enable Q-Link, select all the tracks, put into absolute, hold down Control or Command, and boom. And that will set it to the default value of 0 dB. So as we move, everything could be just done like so. So let me know if that's helpful. Glad you can make it on. Best Screen Jesus is outside in San Diego, beautiful part of the country. All right, so we see from Graham Gardner, hi from West Yorkshire, UK, and our clocks go back. Let me clear my throat. And our clocks go back 1 hour. So thanks for that. So I know that there's generally different dates for daylight saving time. So next week we may be an hour off from people in England or in Europe. So our clocks don't go back. Our clocks in the United States don't change until November 6th. So it may be an hour difference than normal for the live stream. So I just want to give everyone a heads up, because last year, we had all of our European people missed it by an hour or something when we changed the clocks. So thank you for mentioning it, Graham. We see Michael Teams is hot on his ice cream distribution. All right, great to see Matt Elston on. All right, so you see from the Heartbreak Time Machine, thank you so much for these streams. My end product is light years better than a few months ago. My Q submission approvals are way up. I hope you get to hear my work next summer, so hopefully I'll get to hear it sooner, but thank you for the kind words. Gareth is going to steal my nonsensical MIDI playing and write a song around it, so look forward to hearing it. So question, this is from Patrick Emmanuel. Unable to change my value on the time signature after 32/4. 4/6 is not assigned automatically as I scroll with my mouse. So generally there isn't a sixth note. So in a musical time signature, is probably 32/4 is not really a time signature. It's probably 8 measures of 4/4. So, and, you could have 6/4, being that you have 6 quarter notes within a measure, but you can't really have a sixth note. So that's why you don't see those particular values, so are you really in 32/4 or is it really 8 measures of 4/4? So that's probably why you don't see those time signature adjustments and changes. All right, so Captain Energy Music is on from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, wishing everyone a happy Halloween weekend. Thank you for that. Pablo has forgotten his question for me, so hopefully maybe something will trigger your memory, but we're just happy that you're able to join us. All right, so we have Tiago joining from Brazil. Royal Kneebag says, question, who is your favorite guitar player and why is it Jeff Beck? I did get to help out at I was on the audio crew at the 2007 Eric Clapton's Crossroads Festival. It was recorded in Chicago. So I did get to see Jeff Beck there and kind of hang out backstage with him and Vinny Caluta, who I know. So, and Jeff Beck was amazing. But I also, for guitar players, I really like Alan Holdsworth. I got to work with him a lot, and he was always remarkable. But Jeff Beck was really spectacular at the Crossroads Festival in 2007. So that's the one you often see him playing outside with Kyle Wickenfield, the bass player, and Vinny Caluta. They were just phenomenal. So yeah, I'm a Jeff Beck fan, but for kind of technical prowess, watching Alan Holdsworth play and just talking to him about music was really spectacular too. So, okay. And I've gotten to hang out with Eric Johnson, who's a Nuendo user, and Peter Frampton is always phenomenal to see as well. I could see Peter in concert every day. He's always just so good. All right. All right. Chatfield just jumped. right, let me find my spot. Sorry about that. All right, so we have Tiago just asking a question. Is it possible to invert / reverse or flip automation from audio tracks? So I haven't really found a way of doing it, so if we had automation, I don't know. I was kind of playing around with this other day. I just kind of got a question of, if we had automation, to be able to select it and invert, and I'll take a look at it again, but I don't think that there's a way of doing it from, like the Project Logical Editor, but I'll take another look at it just to make sure. So say media type is equal to automation. All right. Yeah, my son got home early for end of first quarter, so it may get noisy. Sorry about that. So I don't know of a way, like, some parameters we can invert for, I think, in the MIDI key editor, or in the MIDI logical editor, but I don't think that there's a way to do it for automation automatically, just to kind of flip it, unfortunately. But I'll make sure to pass that along. All right, so we see just a question, how the time warp works. Okay, so we'll show you. There's two different ways of doing time warping. So let me just come here. So the first way is that we could warp, we could either warp events or warp the grid. So when we come over, we'll just choose our different warp modes. So let's say we want to warp grid. And what warp grid will allow us to do is to basically move the bars here to different areas on the window. So I say, okay, this is where measure 11 is. This is where measure 110 is. So we could adjust, and that will change the tempo. Now, if we wanted to do free warping, at this point, we could just kind of select different events. And as we select these different events, we could move these and kind of stretch within the event without affecting the time. So here you just say, okay, I want a warp grid marker here, here, here. And let's say, the whole band came in early here. We could just adjust these different warp markers to specific points. So we could choose to warp the audio within the event or warp the time to match the audio, depending on which warp mode we are currently in. All right, so we have Besa Rochus joining us, wishing everyone greetings. All right. My son is excited. You may hear him in the background. He's excited to be on his Halloween end of first quarter break. All right. All right, so we see George Conte ask a question. I like to use Universal Audio API channel strip on every track in my project. Is there a way to make Cubase change to the corresponding channel strip window as I select different tracks? So there probably isn't with just a standard insert plugin. But we might be able to trigger it. So if we have, let's say, a number of tracks, so we'll come over here. Let's say, okay, we'll have 16 audio tracks, and I'll just resize these. All right, and I'll get to my mix console, and let's just put I'll come over here, I'll just activate the Q link, and I'm going to put, let's say, just a compressor on all of the channels. So I think you might be able, and let's just say I just want to put different settings on these. And I'll just turn off Q link. So let's say if we have different settings on each of these channels. All right, so I think with the generic remote, that if we come over here to studio setup and that we can say, okay, I want to take this particular knob, that we could say, let's go to command, let's go to selected track and say insert one compressor, and then you could say edit. So now when I come over here, let's just say if I hit a particular knob or button, let's see if I could capture this. Okay, so now we say, fader 1, controller 1. This function will now open up the insert on a selected channel. So I hit this button. That will open up the insert. So if I select this channel, we could open up that insert. So you could trigger it from different channels. So let's say, okay, now we go to insert 1. That selected channel will open up. So at that point, we could just trigger that's if it's loaded in the same one. So you could do it through the generic remote. But anytime you do that, then you can hit a button to open up that particular plugin on all of the tracks. So let me know if that works for you, George. All right, so we see from Zephu says, great question, answer regarding the zoom and the playhead. So. All right, so we see from Patrick Emmanuel A says, Greg, I almost watched all your live or pre-live, live you answered the questions how you created your own job with Cubase. I feel so proud and respect towards Cubase. The response and respect towards their customers is gold. So thank you. I feel lucky every day that I get to, work for, a company whose products I love. And every time they release a new version, it's like Christmas morning, I get to play with new features and stuff like that. So I still am excited about it I'm as excited now about all the new developments as I was 31 years ago. All right. Thank you for all the great moderating by Jazz Dude and Agent K. Appreciate it. Okay. All right, so we see from Mr. O, it says, Greg, I figured it out. The MIDI controller script not working. Thanks. I noticed in the studio setup page that the script was calling for hyper control while my MIDI was coming through another protocol. All right, so it's great. So I had to go back and create a new MIDI script and select vendor. All right. All right. So glad you got that worked out. Thanks for letting me know. All right. So a question. Is it possible to add my own MIDI to the chord pads under the piano style mode? I think it's so great. I'm not the pianist, but is it possible to use near the piano player? So let's say if I have, go to this project here. I think I have. All right, so let's say we have our chord pads open here. All right, so let's say I have like my Rhodes piano. And then if we wanted to go into all right, I think I have a cute little part somewhere. Okay, so let's say I want to take like this piano part here. All right, so what we could do if we wanted to go to chord pads, I think we go to the chord pad setup and go to plane options. We could see pattern. And then if I have a part on the project window, we could just drop that MIDI part. And now as I wanted to, let's go to this chord track and say, okay, we wanted to go back to the Rhodes. So close this out. And so now I'll just kind of hit the triggering. So we could take any little MIDI pattern that you have and just drag it again right into, just hit the edit and go to pattern. And when it says player mode, instead of piano or, there's kind of like piano or guitar player, but we could just, drag and drop a pattern right into here. So as soon as you go to drag and drop it in, you'll see it'll give you a nice little landing spot of drop MIDI part. And then you could just drag it right from there and save it as a preset if you wanted to. So let me know if that's what you wanted. All right, so we're glad Mr. O got his script all sorted out. So, all right, wonderful that Lola says hi. Tell her we hope that she enjoys her pizza tonight. So, glad that she could join us. All right. All right, so we see from Matt Elston in Cubase 12 Pro, how can I hear a vocal track in a control room as it plays, then punch in to record a small section which needs to be heard in the control room as it's being performed without channel monitor button? Okay, so I think if we switch the, I'll just jump to this project really quickly. Okay, so let's say we have, so I'm going to go to preferences. And let's say we'll go to VST, and then we'll say auto monitoring style. I'm going to put it to tape machine style. So let's say we'll come over here, and that's usually where I leave my preference. So let's say I'll set my input. I'll create an audio connection. Let's make an input. Okay, so let's say we'll take this into our stereo in left. So what I want to do now is I'll set up just a quick punch point. So let's say if I'm here, I just want to punch this word in. So now I'm just going to hit I and O, or activate punch in and punch out there. So as we're playing. All right, and let me just arm that for punch for record enable. So now, so try just setting it to, let's see if it's just check my input and output. Let me just make sure I actually have this routed. That would probably help. Okay, so now, so that would automatically just kind of, you know, adjust the monitoring position. So now when it punches in, and then the monitoring is disengaged right after. So again, once you kind of set up, let's say a punch point here. So let's say, okay, now I just want to punch in that one particular word, and I have this track just record enabled. So try just to make sure, and let me just deactivate my punch points quickly. Sorry about that. So I'll just all right. So now, as soon as we come over here, the monitoring is going to kick on during the punch and immediately kind of kick right off. So try again going to preferences and under VST, set the auto monitoring style to tape machine. I think that will work for you. All right, we see Gareth just saying pizza time soon. So let me just see a comment. Love these Club Cubase live streams. Amazing work, Greg. So glad it's helpful. Gareth is doing German sausage pizza tonight. All right, Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button. Let's see, just Demir G just says, so many people thanking Greg. Someone give that man a raise, please. So I'll gladly accept. So you could always write to Steinberg or write to Yamaha, send him an email, tell him that you like the live stream. All right, so we have XEZX Primitive just saying hello. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we have Halmai Lajos just saying hi. Thanks for joining us. All right, Michael Team's giving ice cream to everyone. All right, we see Val Lee just joining us from Vienna. Thanks for being on tonight. All right, and Michael Teams just granted my family and myself 1 gallon of tuxedo cream ice cream. Sounds great. Looking forward to having it after the live stream. All right, my chat field jumped, so. All right, so. All right, so it says, hi, Greg. Maybe I mixed something up, but for some reason I don't see the presets of my third-party VSTIs in the Cubase drop-down window. So it could really depend on the plugin itself. Not every plugin uses VST3 presets. So, you know, like when we go to, Steinberg plugin, you know, if I wanted to come here, we could see kind of a unified, presets. So we could load, presets for different plugins. not every company actually utilizes that, and I can understand that, this is kind of specific for VST3, but if you're doing plugins for other companies that, aren't running VST3 yet, that, they don't want to necessarily have to do two or three, so they may have kind of a plugin specific system, but, if it's using VST3 presets for all the systems, it'll show up. If not, it's just a decision that the plugin developer has made. So all right, so Jazzy Lamel asks, hey Greg, is there any benefit of working in a 64-bit floating point as opposed to 32-bit floating point? So, it can add, it is more precise precision. So, like when you're doing, it could really depend on the material. I've told this story a number of times on live streams that, Greg Lukens, who's, a world-renowned mastering engineer who I'm friends with, lives just, 3 or 4 miles away from me, that when it came out, and I wasn't hearing a huge difference, but, he's like, has like amazing ears, probably some of the best ears in the world. And I sent him like the same file, and I did one mix down at 64-bit floating point and one at 32-bit floating point. And I was like, Greg, tell me about these two files. And he's like, this one sounds a little better. I'm not sure quite why, but this one sounds a little better. And he picked the 64-bit floating point, like immediately. So it can be, it could be really subtle. If you're doing something with like long reverb tails, maybe something squeaky clean, think Alison Krauss type of work, then that would be, I might lean towards that. Some other processing, if you're doing everything in 64-bit, you're not having to do conversion to 32-bit floating point precision for particular plugins. So that could take more CPU converting from 64 to 32-bit floating point for the plugins that don't support 64-bit. So if everything is 64-bit precision, then it could be a little more CPU efficiency, but I think it's really kind of splitting hairs. But, give it a try and see which one that if you notice a difference, then, and if your clients notice a difference, then great. All right, so we see from Rainstars, why is your program so expensive? So I think it's pretty reasonable. I can remember years ago buying one reverb unit, and getting a Lexicon reverb for $2,000, and that was a steal. So I think by time you get all of what's included with Cubase, and if you compare to other programs, by time you buy all of the functionality that's needed to get the same, features that comes with Cubase, that you often spend 2 to 3 times more in third-party add-ons that run into versionitis, that are always kind of out of sync with updates. So having all of those tools included, I think, is a real bargain. So, and as Gareth says, because it's fantastic. Says, I work with FL Studio, but I'd really like to switch to Cubase. So, yeah, you should definitely do that. We have these live streams twice a week, and, you could start off with Cubase Elements and then upgrade to Artist. Start at Cubase Artist, update to Cubase Pro, during different promotions if you wanted to. So you're not going to lose any money with that. All right, so we have a question from Peter. Can you show some funny humanizing quantization? So let's see if I can make it funny. But I'll just do something like really, incredibly boring drum programming, and then we'll put some quantizing in. Okay, let me revert this. Thanks for all the great questions. And again, if you do learn something, make sure you hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that as well. All right, so let's say I want to take this. Okay, so all right, so we'll just all right, so let's just kind of do some. All right, so say kind of generic. But now if I want to just kind of take that beat, I'll just put on just some quick humanization. So let's say if we go to the MIDI inserts, we'll come over here to like the quantizer plugin. So like if you want to put on just different swing, I could just kind of take that feel, which has like minimal swing. So again, if you want to take something that's, and let's say I'll just kind of fix the hi-hats here real quick. So stuff like that where you can say, okay, I want to take it from, or if you just want it more swing, or so we could do that with like the quantizer plugin. But if we go to just our MIDI modifiers, we could also just say, I want it to take, let's randomize the position. So I guess that could be funny depending on, or if you wanted to randomize the velocities between 58 and 84, you know, so you could do different stuff like that and be able to have, you know, I wanted to velocity compress different components, but, you know, being able to kind of do stuff like that, you know, being able to do swings, you know, is kind of a huge deal for a lot of people. All right. All right, so we have a question from Scott Davies. It says, hi, Greg. I'm thinking about moving from Mac to Windows. I've seen a lot of videos talking about track count and number of plugins, etc., but wanted to know your experience of using M1, CPU bugs, etc. So, not everything is M1 native. So there's still a number of plugins. Like, if you've invested into like the UAD hardware platforms, those aren't going to be, like they haven't announced I guess you could run the native versions on Spark, but, there's a lot of stuff that's still not working. So, I would say on PC, I don't have to worry about, M1 native processing. Or, it just kind of works. Whereas Mac, it could be, just you have to make sure that every piece of hardware that you have, that your control surfaces work in M1 native mode, that your audio interfaces, your MIDI interfaces, that all of your plugins, that all the different sound sets for expansions for plugins are all working in M1 native. So, and, by the time you start thinking of that, where that's always going to be a factor in every decision that you make, and realize that that whole architecture could change. So just be aware of that. So I haven't had any problems on my Windows 10 personal studio. I'm running in Rosetta. I'm waiting for Halion to be updated. Just this week we had Retrolog that was updated to the new Steinberg licensing, and we had the Grand was just updated last week for M1 native. So it's getting there, but it's a big burden on developers to radically change the architectures depending on a processor change as well. So I think that, there's great systems for Mac and PC that are available. Maybe not everything is M1 native, but I could do everything I want on my MacBook, running in Rosetta mode. I'm sure I could push it further, but, maybe for the academic sense of pushing it, it's like I don't do projects where I need, 4,500 tracks going on simultaneously of a large orchestral thing. But I know, I have many friends that do. So, it's hard to say. It's still kind of in transition for a lot of aspects. So, but I think either platform works great. So, all right, let's keep reading through questions. See, Garrett just says Groove Agent is the bomb, as they say in his village. So it's a smart village to live in. All right, so it just says, I have a problem with Cubase 12 not saving audio output settings every time change. So, the settings are always kind of mimicked in, are always going to be, I've always had the settings preserved for me. If you're using the control room, so I'm not sure if you're using the control room can be kind of set up for being independent of the project. So one thing that you could do is if you go to your audio connections, if it's just your outputs, try saving it as a preset. Go to your control room and save it as a preset and see if that will, preserve it for you. But I don't have any problems, having my setup change. So maybe if you're starting Cubase, load the project and then turn on the audio interface, I can see where it's migrating from one audio interface to another, that sometimes those can get, lost in translation. But, if you could let us know if it's like the agent, that the audio interface is on and you're using the same interface and not switching between different interfaces, that would be helpful. All right. So just see question, how do I colors block my vocal take as you are showing on your vocal track? All right, so that's just selected. That's just to indicate that so if it's this black, that just indicates that is selected. That's a selected event. So when we select it, it kind of changes colors to indicate what events are selected. So if you select the event, let me know if that's the black that you're referring to with that. All right, so we see a question. Why does my Cubase crash every time I load a template / session in a different frequency, like from 44K to 48K? So I can freely, so a lot of times it could be, when I've seen this issue is when people are externally clocking their audio interface, or they have another digital audio device. Like if you have an audio interface with an ADAT input and it's set to receive clock sync from, let's say a converter that's like 8 mic pre's going into 8 channels of ADAT light pipe, and the converter is set to be the clock master. So the one thing to check is to make sure that the audio interface, that if you switch the sample rate of the project and the project setup, when you hit Shift plus S, if you see that immediately reflect in the audio interface, but make sure that your audio interface isn't clocking externally. And you could also just come over here if you go to select your audio interface in the studio setup. So if you go to studio setup, check here and check the clock source and make sure that, and check to see if you have the clock source, because it could be that your audio interface is clocked and your audio interface is set to one particular, one clock of an external device. And when you switch it, then it's not kind of switching the sample rates correctly. So check that. All right, so we have Graham Witcher on. Great to see you on. We see he's going to be moving house and relocating his studio. All right, well, good luck with the move. I know how terrible moving is. It's absolutely no fun, but sometimes it's fun to set up to redo your studio and tear it all apart and just redo it. All right, so we just see from Daniela Takan. Hi guys. I searched the playlist for beginners. There's so much playlist in this channel using Cubase 12 Pro. So I think there's one guy who does like wonderful tutorials, and I think he has I haven't watched it all the way through, but I've heard really good things about it. And it's One Man and His Song. He did a fabulous series of YouTube videos on Halion 6. And I think his style is just wonderful. So check out, I think it's One Man and His Song, and probably Jazz Dude will put it in the link as well. But that's check that out. And I think that's just kind of getting started with Cubase. And I've heard really great things about them, and I really enjoyed his Halion tutorials as well. See, Gareth is saying goodnight, and Pablo is sad. All right, so we see from Born to Sing, how do I use TalkBack in Cubase? Currently, I'm using a 2-in, 2-out Apogee interface. So you could use, let's say if you have one input for a vocalist and one input for your TalkBack, you would just simply go to your audio connections from your studio menu. So let's say, okay, we have a mono in. So let's say we want to set up TalkBack for our singer. So we will just come here and say, okay, we'll do 2 monos, and I'll just get rid of this one. So let's say So we want input 1 for the microphone from the vocalist, and we want input 2 to be set up for our talkback mic. So now what we do is just come over here. We'll say, okay, this is going to be, we right click to add a talkback, and we're going to say this is going to be set to input 2. So now when we're in our control room, when we want to communicate to the vocalist, we can make sure that the talkback is enabled. And now when we hit the talkback button, we could communicate with a microphone that's connected to in the control room, and then they could hear you in the tracking room once talkback is enabled. So once again, set one input for an audio interface for the audio track, the other for the talkback, and then in the control room, make sure in the Q mix where the artist is listening that you have talkback enabled, and then you could just turn on talkback. And then as you talk into the microphone that's connected into input 2 by your desk or wherever you're working, at that point, that microphone will be fed to the headphones of the person. And if they want to do that, make sure that the headphones are being fed directly from the control room. And if it's just 2 in, 2 out, you may not be able to hear the speakers as you're doing it. And that's just a limitation of the I/O. But you could just set the headphone mix directly here, or have the headphone mix if you want to hear the speakers and you want them. You could just have the vocalist listen to the main mix. So if you go to theirs, this way you can have 2 outputs. The vocalist is hearing the same thing. One input is going from the vocalist or musician. The other input is going to your talkback mic. All right. All right, just reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, so we just see from Daniela Tocan, thanks, Jazzy. I did a search, things like how an automation can be converted to a simple WAV file. Okay, so let's say if we had a WAV file, and let's say if I come here to this and we have automation, so let's say I want my automation to fade in for that WAV file. So let's say if I select this, and then I think if we even do, let's see if we can do, if it works with the bounce selection. No. All right. So if we wanted to render in place, let me just, so when you come here, if you wanted to apply the automation like into the file, you know, if we go to edit, and let's go to render in place and go to render settings. So we'll just say, let's go to the channel settings. And we could choose to, you know, replace to mute the source events, or, you know, keep it. So if I just wanted to render that, we can now look at this waveform and we can see that the automation from this has automatically been embedded directly into this particular file. Right, just reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. chat field just jumped. Let me just find my spot. Okay, so we see Michael Pierce just says, tape machine monitoring, the king of monitoring styles. Okay, all right, so we see from Born to Sing, how can I... So how can I design delay in Cubase? Okay, so let me just get to a quick project here. So I'm not sure if you want to add a delay to like an audio track, but we can show you how to do that. So let's say we're here. All right, so let's say I want to take my lead vocal and I'm going to add an effects track to the selected channel. I'll just put in, let's say, mono delay. I want to make this like...
It was 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home. You looked my way and your heart shone
So if you just select the track here, and you could add effects channel to the track. So when I'm on the lead vocal, I could just say, okay, let's get to our sends.
Now I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long time ago.
And then we can control how much is...
The day that we wed seems like a long, long time ago. And our first kiss, there was no regret, right after that Garth Brooks show.
So that's a way to kind of add delay. So let me know if that's kind of what you wanted to do. Let's see, and so how can I design user automation? So, you know, if you wanted to just click in the lower left-hand corner, this would open up the automation lanes. So we could just see that we have volume by default. But if we just select the fader, now we could just kind of click on W and R.
Your daddy called my mom,
and I could just automate.
Too damn good for any boy that dumb.
So now when I play it back,
you told your daddy, called my
everything.
mom, said you were too damn good for any boy that dumb.
So any parameter can be automated in the same way. So if you want to automate the EQ, the delay, volume panning. So let me know if that's helpful. Okay, so question, having a brain freeze. Instrument track, how can I see the chord pads without using the lower zone? All right, so I think the chord pads might be designed to only be in the lower zone. So let me just see. So I think it's always going to be kind of designed to be in the lower zone. Let me just see if there's... Yeah, so it was never, it was always kind of designed in the lower zone. Sometimes like when we go into the sample editor or the MIDI editor, the Ds are designed as also being in standalone windows that could work in both ways. So people that were acclimated to working in kind of the full mixer, the full editor view can do that. But since the chord pads were never designed to work as a standalone, that we can now, that's why it's always kind of fixed in the lower zone. So all right, so you just see from guitar and music, I have a problem with Cubase 12 not saving audio output settings every time I change and showing not connected. Please help me. So maybe if you could let us know if which audio interface you're using, and if you're switching back and forth between different audio interfaces. But pretty much all my settings will be preserved when saving the project. But if the audio interface isn't present, then it may try to remap the outputs to a different interface. So if you start Cubase without the audio interface and you load up the project with the audio interface turned off, that could create a situation where that might happen. All right, great to see Root Screen on. All right. All right, so we see from Patrick Emanuel, Greg did a song on a 2-5-1 progression with vocal and basic major minor chords. But if I drag that song to a chord track, it's showing the D sus minor ninth, Cubase recognized chords. Why normal minor chord changes ninth? Okay, so I'm not sure if so Patrick, if you could let us know if it's actually, an audio track or MIDI that you're doing it with, and if you're doing, so like, I've found that obviously, with anything that's going to be very subjective, but let's say I want to take this guitar part and drag it to the chord track, that, the results are, could be, so this one just kind of, was accurate, and the ones that I've kind of thrown at it have been pretty accurate. So let me know if it's audio, and, sometimes that could be more subjective, and if you have an audio example that you want to share with like a WeTransfer, I'd be happy to kind of take a look at it as well. All right, so wonderful to see David Griffiths checking in from Wales in the UK. All right, so David Griffiths asked, is there a way I could get the chord pads from Howley and Sonic to create the MIDI notes of that chord on an instrument track? So I think what it's designed to do is to actually, we can get those notes to be triggered. We can get the chord to be triggered, or the pad to be triggered from a note, but I don't think that, let me just find a setting here quickly. All right. All right. So what we could do is, let's say I wanted to trigger these particular. I'm just going to learn a trigger note here. And now I'm going to learn a trigger note for this pad. So, and I'll just quickly just do a couple more. So right click on the pad itself. So now if I wanted to sequence this, it doesn't necessarily give you all the arpeggios, but I think the intention is where if I'm just recording that I could, and I record to one note. So now I've recorded those single notes as triggers, and when we go to listen to it, so, and I'm not sure if what the reasoning is. Sometimes, it takes a lot of time to get those together. So if we were to take chord, like arpeggios that have been painstakingly put together, we may not want to. I'm not sure if it's, that, it could be that, but I don't know for sure that, okay, we spent, months working on these that we don't want to necessarily have it drag and drop in, have everyone take all of our hard work and be able to utilize it for other instruments. But you could still have it play back just by recording this single note and assigning that as a trigger note for the chords. All right. So we see Jumps Powwow Clark just saying, get the book Future Sounds by David Garibaldi and make drum groups from the patterns in that book. Yeah, he's an amazing drummer. I've gotten to watch many Tower of Power concerts. Their old sound guy used to record all their shows in Nuendo and Cubase. So when they had different musicians, they could have all the parts kind of laid out. All right, so we see from Chaser, just says, hi, Greg. When I export an audio or let's say a MIDI synth, I notice that the importing the exported file, zooming in the file, it always shows a bit forward, never exact on the timing point. Do you know why? So let's take a look. All right, so let's get in my pattern mode. All right, so say I'll just render in place. Okay, and we look at it. So let's go ahead and just play it together, just out of curiosity. And I'll just not put that into record. Sorry about that. So let's see if we zoom in on both of them. So it looks in time, reasonable there. So let's see if I want to take this and let's do an export audio mix down. We'll take that. And let's import it into, we'll create an audio track. If we want to look at those, that looks pretty accurate to me, the audio. So so I don't think it's anything, so it looks correct to me, and realize that sometimes by time that a note is sent, it may take, a millisecond or two for the sample to be triggered as well. All right. Reading through comments. All right. All right, so we see from Secret Studios. Hi, Greg. In case I'm missing it, is it possible after setting root note to have chord track and chord track composition tools reflect Roman numerical interval deviations, Nashville numbering? So currently it doesn't do, the Roman numerals are slightly different than Nashville numbering. So while they're kind of both numeric representations, there are things in Nashville numbering that aren't really covered in Roman numerals. So, but currently it doesn't do Nashville numbers. So, but if you took the project to, if you exported it even to Dorco Essential, which is free, you could do I believe you could do the chord track there and have Nashville numbers automatically applied. So, but currently it's just going to actually show you the chord. So. And I got your email, and I had passed on the comments as well. So thanks for sending the email, Jay. All right, so I just see, Greg, I want to make my vocal waves as black while recording. All right, so let me just... see if we could change the colors while recording. So it might just show it just in red. So let's say if I want to take this vocal... just going to send this to a group channel. Now add an audio track. And I'm going to set the group as the input. All right, so let's say if we are recording, so I'll take the lead vocal here.
Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago.
So as we record here,
it was 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home. You looked my way and your heart shone
I'll
through.
just turn this up a little bit.
It caught
more
my
gain.
breath while you called me to. Well, even now I'm so in love with you, just like a long,
do this as a mono track.
long time ago.
We just set this up as mono here quickly. So it looks kind of dark here, but let me just set it up for mono. So I'm going to add this. We'll make a mono group here, and let's add a mono audio channel.
I'm so in love with you.
And I'm just going to take the delay off on this.
Just like a long, long time ago. Oh, I remember the day that we went.
All right, so
Seems
say
like a long,
I'm recording.
long time ago. And our first kiss, there was no regret. Right after that Garth Brooks show. You told your daddy and he called my mom. Said you were too damn good.
So while it's recording, you know, let's see if we can make adjustments to the waveforms. Let's say we go to preferences, but I mean, it's kind of dark, but if we wanted to get to event display audio, so let's say our waveform brightness, let's set that all the way down. So while we are recording,
For any boy that dumb, his soured words are now dead and
so
done.
if you want the
That was
waveform
a
to be
long,
black,
long time ago.
you could just make that adjustment.
Now our two grown daughters are married with kids
And if you wanted it,
of their own.
again, let's come over here to preferences.
And I know your dad's pretty happy now.
You can make it
'Cause
white
what began as our first kiss,
or somewhere in the
it
middle.
started all of this. Do you remember the day that...
So try again going to preferences, and you'll see waveform brightness. You could adjust that if you want all black waveforms. I'll just apply the defaults here. All right, so let me know if that's helpful. All right, thanks for all the great questions. All right, so you just see from Gadizana, hello, if I wanted to make automation on multiple channels together, what's the best way to do that? I don't want to add all of them to a group channel because it's going to affect the volume. Thanks. All right, so let's jump back to this project here. So all right, I'll go ahead and revert. All right, so, you know, if I wanted to take, like, let's say all of my drum channels here, you know, one of the things you could do is say, okay, while we're doing this, I want to link these. We could do Q-link, and then if I wanted to, and let me just put these not into absolute mode. So now that I have Q-link turned on, I can, all the selected channels, we could just automate like so. So let's say I'm just going to click on W. And then if I wanted to suspend, I could just say, okay, let's do that. And then enable quick link. So we could link and mix multiple channels. Now, if I have my MIDI remote set up here, so let's say I'm going to jump to my nano control. And I will switch the mapping page to mixer. So now, while I'm automating my different parameters, I will just come over here. So let's say I'm just playing. And I'm just going to grab the faders on my nano control. And then I could hit the bank button to do. And just use my nano control. So it's like now. Then I can bring up and I could solo. So, you know, that's several different ways to kind of automate multiple files without sending them to a group. All right, so we see from just comment, your live is awesome. I'm proud to be a Cubase user, so it makes me feel good. Thank you for the kind words. All right, we see Born to Sing says, Greg regarding the talk back. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So you're welcome. All right. My chat field just jumped, so let me just find where I was. Okay, so I think I'm in the neighborhood. Let me find my spot. Thanks again for all the wonderful questions. We're doing pretty well on time. All right, so I just see question. I'm on Windows. Is it possible to have a shared plugin manager.xml file so I don't have to manage plugins in version 11 and version 12? I just use plugin manager in one. So, you know, once you install version 12, it's going to, you know, basically copy all of the plugin manager settings from version 11 over. So, you know, I've never really had the need to kind of switch back and forth between different ones. Maybe I don't dynamically change my plugin settings, but, you know, version 12 should automatically look to the settings in version 11 and just simply kind of have that automatically applied to it. So you see, his Jazz Dude says, if you have the same plugins, there's no need, but if you want to get rid of problematic VST2 stuff, just rename the folder, and that's what he did. So, okay, so we see from Born to Sing, it just needs automation on delay specifically. So let me just jump back to project with some vocals. All right, so if you wanted to come here, and since I've destroyed this song well, and I like the song too much, I'm going to just revert it. All right, so let's say I want to do just a delay on a vocal, so I will come here to the sends, and right click, and let's add, let's say, our mono delay. So we'll make it. All right. So let's say I want this to be like maybe $1.25. And I just wanted it to maybe be like in certain phrases. So let's say while we're here, all you have to do now is just click on the W in the plugin itself.
Day we first met, that was a long, long time ago. It was 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home. You looked my way and your heart shone through. It caught my breath while you called me to.
And let me just turn off the
Well,
delay
even
here.
now I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long time ago.
So let's say when he starts up again, I want no
remember
delay.
the day that we wed. Seems like a long, long time ago. And our first kiss, there was no regret. Right after that Garth Brooks show, you told your daddy.
So now we're going to go back, listen to it.
Long, long time ago. And our first kiss, there was
So now we have
no
our mix to
regret.
nothing.
Right after
And now,
that Garth Brooks show, you told your daddy and he called.
so that's like, some techniques you could use for automating delay. So let me know if that's helpful. All right. I just see a question. What computer should I get for Cubase 12 and Steinberg UR22C? So it's really, Cubase runs great on Mac or PC, and it's really just a personal preference to whatever you want to do. It could also depend on the projects. Like if you're just recording, 16 tracks at once, you could get behind a laptop. If you're doing 4,500 tracks of orchestral templates, then probably a desktop would be more in line. But even, contemporary laptops will give you great results. And you could, there's a lot of power in laptops, but it could really depend. But, pretty much any new computer would be a great choice. Mac or PC is really just kind of a personal preference. All right, so we just see, how do I separate every instrument in separate track designed in MIDI? You shown a few minutes back, it would help me to do mixing. All right, so, if, depending on the instrument itself, so let's say if I have, like here, I probably have a Halion Sonic SE, so it's always kind of a workhorse. So we come over here. And let's say if we go to the Verve piano, so right now, if I just wanted to, all right. So when we come over here to, mix, you could load up multiple instruments here and just send them. You have each channel could have its own dedicated MIDI output. So if we loaded a sound into slot 2, we could now come over here. So let's say I want to put a bass. I could send that to output 2. I could send this to output 3. And we can see that these outputs are just going to be added directly into the project. So when I just come, I'll just say, okay, we watch our mixer here, Verve piano, slot 2, slot 3. I add output 4. This is automatically added to the mixer. So now I could adjust the volume of each of these channels. And if we want to see that on the project window, we can now just click here on an instrument track, and then all of the outputs are going to be assignable here. So if you wanted to draw automation in, you just kind of go to the lower left-hand corner of an instrument track, and all the multiple outputs of that instrument track are available to view directly there. So we see from Cubase X as chord pad outside the lower zone follow-up, the lower zone only. Might explain why I couldn't find it. Can we make it a feature request? I never used the lower zone. That's why I use 3 monitors. I'll pass it along. So we said, so you see from Brian Sawyer, says Zoom meeting today. I've been on and off for the last 2 weeks. So I'm kind of in between Zoom licenses. As of October 1st, and my company wasn't able to get a Zoom license before today, so we're going to try to do it, our October Zoom, on next Friday. So sorry for the confusion, Brian. We made an announcement earlier. So. All right. So I just see from Born to saying, from where can I get this in Cubase 10.5 Pro? So if you could, maybe if you could specify what exact feature it was. All right, so we just see how do I spread my vocal? If I use Imager, where should I use it? Insert or send? So if I wanted to make a vocal wider, I would probably, so if you wanted to make it sound wider, so let's come over here to the lead vocal here, and I'll just bypass this, turn this off. So let's say if I wanted to do this, because if your vocal is mono, you'd probably want to just come here and add an effects channel send, and let's say we'll make it the Imager.
My way and your heart shone through. It caught my breath. You called me to.
So now I could just come over here and set the different
even
frequencies.
Now I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long time ago.
So you could apply there and then have more kind of stereo width, but often you're going to get, stereo width, panning vocals. Like if we want to take, let's listen to just the vocals here. So we'll have a number of vocals.
While you called me to. Well, even now I'm so in love with you.
Let's see,
just like a long, long time ago.
and each of these vocals will just kind of be panned, and in this track that he also does kind of an old school production trick of just a whisper track,
on our yellow coach to ferry us home.
just to kind of give it an interesting texture. But if we want to take the background vocals here, we'll see that these will be, so these will often be kind of panned independently. So let's say we're going to have,
just like a long, long time ago.
so at that point you could take your background vocals and pan them out. So a lot of times, people will want to keep the vocal, imagers sometimes are more useful for stereo stuff to make it a little wider, but just kind of use a bit more like stereo effects, like delay can often make it sound wider, reverb can make it sound wider, and just like doubling parts and panning, so it's very common to have background vocals that'll be the same, like maybe two background harmonies, panned hard left, recorded again, panned hard right, recorded again, panned in the center. So like a lot of tracks you'll see there will be like 6 different background vocals, and it's going to be the 3 parts recorded multiple times and panned to get kind of thicker, wider sounding vocals. All right. So we just see a question from Joe K. When, why not would you use normalize over clip gain over pre-gain to gain stage your tracks? So I would do clip gain and pre-gain kind of like, before the mixing process. So you could, when I would often run normalize, I mean, if you had something that was just recorded at such a low level that adjusting the gain up by 24 dB isn't still loud enough, then normalizing. But also you could normalize like your final mix. So let's say you're kind of in the ballpark and you're like, oh, if my final mix down, I want it to be at minus 14 LUFS. You can now go to the audio, to processes, and when you normalize, you could choose. You could actually choose to normalize to a very specific loudness normalized level. So you can say, okay, my song ranged at minus 12 to minus 13 LUFS, but I want it to be exactly minus 14. Boom. You could normalize at that stage. So I use kind of the pre-gain for mixing, and kind of the normalize is kind of like a final touch, or for kind of a corrective thing where, maybe it was like investigational or forensic audio and you needed to, get a lot of gain that just wasn't available in the recording itself. And with that will probably come noise, but sometimes that's the nature of the beast. All right. So see, can you please guide me about using VariAudio to tune vocal in advanced level? All right. So, if you wanted to do, I guess this is addressed to me, but I'm not Greg Malik. There might be someone else. But if I wanted to, let me hear my son practicing bass in the background. He had his first concert last night, and someone stole his bow from the high school orchestra. It was a traumatic event. All right. So let's say I wanted to do my VariAudio, so I'll come here. So some things you could do in VariAudio that make it kind of unique is, one, the first thing I would do is you have a smart controls. We could just change this to show all smart controls. So let's go ahead and I'll just kind of zoom in, just using Shift G and Shift H just to kind of bring these out, and we can hit G and H to bring these. So let's say I just wanted to do, we could select multiple words. So when we look at our different tools, one is we could just correct the pitch just by going directly in the bottom here, and this may have already been kind of corrected. Let me just load up a different project. Just to kind of show this. All right, so I'll come here. Okay, so when we switch to show all tool mode, so if we wanted to select a number of segments, and we could think of these as, basic notes, we could grab the bottom tool, the bottom center, and that will correct the pitch. If we wanted to straighten the pitch on the selected notes, we could just grab the upper center. So if you wanted that to be kind of very mechanical sounding, maybe what a lot of people would call like auto-tune process, where it's just so heavily corrected. Then we have different kind of transition points as well. So if I want to take, we have this little diamond. So I say, okay, I want the pitch here to go up or down. We could do it, but from that diamond point. So as I adjust the pitch, we can now just adjust from that specific point. So if I said, oh, the person on this note drifted flat, so I want to take from right here and raise the pitch where they lost their diaphragm support. We could adjust the volume. So if you wanted to adjust, if you're hearing like, oh, this consonant is a little loud, or if you wanted to adjust the formant, you could adjust directly there. We could also just say, okay, as I'm working with a specific phrase, let's say I'm doing my VariAudio tuning here, and now I wanted to quantize the pitch but not affect the transitions. We could just kind of set these little triangles in the upper corners and be able to adjust. If I wanted this to be stretched out or shortened, I could just kind of warp the events accordingly. If I wanted to split, I just could go to the bottom and that will create a new segment. Or if we go to the edge and I wanted this to be one segment, I could glue those different events. So a lot of the tools are, very easy and accessible right there. You could also just use like a MIDI reference part. So I could say, let's go to the grand, and I could take a MIDI track and overlay, and see what the MIDI notes actually are and use that as a reference. Now we could also use scale correction. So I could say, I only wanted, let's say this song is in the key of G. So now if I wanted it to only to snap, we could say, snap pitch editing. So while I'm here, I could say, don't go to notes that are out of the key. It'll only snap to notes that are within the key. We could also come over here and colorize based on like the scale and chords. So we can say this is out of key. So maybe I wanted that event to be there, and let's glue it together to make it one segment. So those are some of the things you could do with VariAudio, but it's a very powerful and again, completely integrated editing environment directly within Cubase. And so. All right. Okay, so we see from Roger Cabo. Hey, Greg, I saw a question about jog the timeline with a controller. When zoom out, the movement is painfully slow. I have the same problem. Perhaps any solution for this? Thank you. So depends on a controller. So like, let's say I have my CC121. If I put this into jog, we can, and let's, if I wanted to like, put it into scrub even, we could, so, like when, let's say I'll just, put it into jog mode here, that we could, just, so let's say even, but realize if you're kind of zoomed in, like near the sample level, that as you jog, let me just see if we could, as we zoom here, it may change. So let's say if we change the grid to adapt to zoom. So let's see if the grid setting has, but my kind of jog wheel kind of, works, and every jog wheel will work differently, but this is just kind of like my CC121. And that seems, there's a lot of stuff that's trying to, use several MIDI commands to get in between the different values, but I think that this kind of works pretty well. And let's see if I just, like if I'm in stationary cursor, but let's say even while I'm playing, so let's say if I just wanted to. I'll zoom in here, so let's say. So, it could depend on, how, what controller you're using and how that controller is responding as well. So maybe, Roger, if you could let us know what controller it is. Okay, just reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. So you see Pablo just saying new demo projects for Greg. Yeah, if you guys have demo projects that you want me to use that aren't published somewhere, I'd be happy to use demo projects. Always looking for new demo projects. But I may have pulled out a couple that I haven't used in a while, so. All right, we see Kenny Jobson has to run and just thanking me for great tips. So thanks for joining. All right, so we see from Crypto Incognito, do you answer questions? I'm new to Cubase and want to know how to cut in samples. My project goes with 145 BPM. I want my baseline sample to same BPM. So if you wanted to cut data in a project, you can just come directly over here, grab the scissors tool, and then if you wanted to erase, you could erase events, or if you wanted to grab the range tool, this tool here, you could also just hit delete if you wanted to cut, or if you hold down Command or Control plus Option X, you could kind of delete that time and move the other events backwards. So, and let's say you have a project at 145 BPM. Sorry about that. I'll just do new project and we'll show you how to kind of match tempos of loops. So generally loops will have a BPM associated with them. So let's say if I come over here, let's just grab some quick drum loops. Okay, so right now I can see that this has 137 in the name, indicating that it's 137 beats a minute. So. All right, so now if I want this to follow the project tempo, what I could do is select this and we'll see musical mode here. So now we're at 137. It's going to play back at 120, but if I type in 145 and we go to the beginning. Now if I go to the edge here, I can drag it out and we made copies. Now let's find a bass loop. So let's say... all right, so say I drag this in, and this tempo that we could see is going to be 125 BPM. So now when we play these together, again, once this is in musical mode, if that wasn't in musical mode, that's the original. But selecting the event and putting it into musical mode, that will automatically now speed that up. So let's say, okay, I want to repeat this. And now whatever tempo I type in, so I want it to be 156. Or I want it to be 108. Or not 360, sorry, let's say. 108. So once you kind of drag events in, you could place them into musical mode. If you go to the media and go to pool window, you could also open up your audio files here, and then you could see what the BPM is and place it into musical mode there. And then just hit play, set the tempo, and it should be all set. All right, so we see Robbie Bowling's just made it in from a doctor's appointment. So we see Born to Sing, I think, is maybe tagging Greg Malik instead of me. So my name is Greg Undo, but I think if you just tag at Cubase, since I'm the host of the live stream, that you could reach out to me. So Greg Malik may be getting a lot of unintended messages. So. All right, we see from Matt Elliston, thanks for the expert solution to my question, Greg. Very much appreciated. So we're glad that you're here and able to join us. All right, so we have a question from Hans Henrik Bay Privat. Can I load 20 rack instruments at once? Example, 20 samplers. I want to use MIDI channels, sending to rack instruments, not instrument channels. Okay, so if you wanted to... so what you could do, let's see... Let's do new project. So let's say if we come over here to a VSTI, so let's say we wanted to load up, 20 Hallian Sonic SE. So I'm going to just load them up once. All right, I'll just do like 4 or 5. So, and I'm creating MIDI tracks based on these. Okay, so now I have MIDI tracks and I have all of the instrument channels. So what I want to do is I'm going to select all of these and I'm going to, let's see if we could do this. So I'm going to now go to File, to Export Selected Tracks. And these are all kind of routed. We could choose to copy media files or not. We could reference media files. So if it's open, so we'll say 5HSSE. All right, and we'll save it to our desktop. Okay, so now that I've done that, I can just come directly to a new project. And I'll go to, we're going to export selected tracks and we're going to import a track archive. So we'll say 5HSSE. I hit open. We'll select all. So we'll see the instrument tracks. And it doesn't look like that. All right, so let me just jump back here. I'll try another method. It could be that there's no data loaded. Try saving as a project. And we'll go to import tracks from project. Let's see if this will load them up. Yeah, so it doesn't look like it loads up the the particular instruments, unfortunately. But like since these tracks aren't necessarily, and that's one of the problems with MIDI tracks is that MIDI tracks, can't really know the exact destination when you save it as a MIDI track. So if you have the option, it's obviously much easier and more consolidated to have it as instrument tracks. But probably if you're doing MIDI tracks, I assume you're probably going into VE Pro. So. All right, so we see question, does normalizing destroy the wave file? So it can affect the dynamic range, but if you're not doing like a super heavy duty amount of normalizing, you should be fine. But you could always undo it if you found that if it had any adverse effects on your audio file. But generally it's not going to load up and destroy MIDI files by default or audio files by default. Okay, so we see a question from Patrick. Greg, while working on a 7-minute song, I programmed 16th note bass, but after working on it, I want to undo. I want bass to be in bar start and end. I want to remove all in-between notes. Is that possible to do? Okay, so let's say if we have... Sorry for hitting my mic. Okay, so let's say I'll just put in some... We just... All right, so let's say if I wanted to, I'm just going to reread this. So I only want bass to be in a bar start and end. I want to remove all in-between notes. Is it possible to do? So let's say I will... Just set up the situation here. All right, so okay, so let's say I wanted to keep like, the notes at the beginning and the end of the bar and get rid of these notes. So let's go to the logical editor and setup. So let's come over and let's remove all these. So we want to delete notes, type is equal to note. We'll insert and we'll say our position inside bar range. And I could say, okay, I want, like in this case, we'll say notes here. So I could just kind of graphically drag. And this is like one bar. So what we could do now is I'll just come over here, hit apply, and let me just... I'll just set this exactly. Let me just... Okay, so now we could say we want to delete notes that are between here, we'll just set this to so you can kind of just set up conditions where you could just say between these two notes inside this bar range, and you could do that graphically, just delete notes within that specified range. So try that. Patrick, you can experiment. All right, just all right, reading through comments, see how we're doing on time. All right, we're doing well. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, so you see Born to Sing says, Greg, thank you so much for showing the VariAudio. Helped me a lot. It's just an amazing DAW, no doubt. So. All right, my chat field just jumped, so let me just... Okay, so I just see from Fadi Gurgis or Fadi Gurgis. Hi, Greg. Sometimes I'm facing an audio crackling or pops in my tracks after audio mixdown. Please advise. So the one thing that, sometimes some plugins can, cause like crackles and pops, like when exporting file. But the first thing I would do in situations where you're running into that is maybe just go to your studio setup and select under audio system, your audio interface, and try to raise the buffer and, raise that to a higher level. And that often will take care of it. So sometimes it may be playing fine, in real time, but then when exporting, sometimes some plugins can cause that. So, if you raise your buffer, again, go to studio setup, select it, and go to control panel, try increasing the buffer size, and that will probably help. All right, just reading through different comments. We see Benny's just saying, would it be cool if we could do a club Cubase song together? So yeah, send over tracks. I'll play bass, and like that's how Hot Mess kind of started. So, and I think they'll be working on their third. We'll be working on the third album. So, but yeah, just say, hey, I'm looking for this musician, and it's always great to collaborate with different people. I see from Born to Sing just says, Greg, apologies, my bad. Cubase would have been better. It doesn't bother me. I just, Greg Malik maybe. It's like, why am I getting all these messages? So just so you know, yeah, my name's Greg Ondo, Ondo, but you could just add Cubase is fine. All right, so we see from Sean Mitchell, England, can you range a MIDI event the same way you did the audio track? So certainly. So if you wanted to just grab the range tool here and delete. So it works the same exact functional way. If I wanted to Control Shift X, and we could. So yeah, it's going to have the same exact functionality for MIDI or audio events as well. So. All right, so I just see from Jazzy Lamel. Says, hey, Greg, my friend is bringing his Triton rack module and wants to be able to record all the MIDI or multi-timbral parts into Cubase from it, but is there a way to do that on separate MIDI tracks? So really all you have to do is, create a MIDI track. And, Cubase has, MIDI channels 1 through 16, but also an any. So if you record all the tracks into MIDI channel any, so you'll have kind of like all 16 MIDI channels from the Triton rack could be in here, and then select that, go to your MIDI menu, and then you want to choose to dissolve part. And here you could dissolve part by pitches or by MIDI channels. If you choose MIDI channels, then each of the MIDI files will automatically be extracted onto their own MIDI track. So once again, just put it to MIDI channel any. Go to your MIDI menu and choose dissolve part, and then separate by channel. All right, just kind of reading through comments again. All right. All right. So we see a question: how to have loop when we are in control room. All right. So not sure if it's like if we wanted to listen to the loops. So if we have loops here, we could just say, okay, I just wanted to pick a bunch of MIDI loops. All right. So let's say, so now, we could just audition. And let's say we do this. Let's say, all right. All right, so let's say if I come here and I just have this loop going on. See if it continues to play. Yeah, so if you want the loops to continue to play, like after it's at the end. So if you want that to continuously play, once it gets to the end, if you turn this icon on, then it will just automatically play. So let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right, we see Michael Pierce is going to go and hide. We'll see him next week. So we look forward to seeing your hair on next Friday's Zoom. So, all right. So we see from Green 231. Hi, could you tell us if there's any shortcut to show all automation in the project? So if we go to the automation panel, you could just come right over here and show used automation. So if there is a number of different automation. So let's say if I wanted to go to here, so let's hide. I'll come here. I think we wrote a bunch of nonsensical automation here. Hit F6, and then we could say I want to hide all automation or show used automation. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, we see Pablo has to take off. All right, let's check the time. All right, so trying to catch up. All right, so we see a question. I cannot load presets into TribeWorks since I updated to Cubase 12 Pro only in Halion. I will find the presets of TribeWorks and Hypnotic Dance. Do you know why? So it could be, so let's say if I wanted to come over here to Halion Sonic SE. So, you know, I'm not sure if at one point, if I'm trying to remember if these were kind of separate instruments or they always kind of worked inside of Halion Sonic SE, but let's go ahead and add an instrument track and we'll do Halion Sonic SE. Come over here, let's go to TribeWorks. See if I have it in. All right, let me go over to media here. Okay, let me see if I see them. They're not always alphabetical. Let me see, I may not have them installed. Let me just check my MediaBay. Yeah, I don't think I have them installed on my system, but I'll make a note to see if I get them installed on Tuesday and see if it's a problem. Sorry about that. Thought I had it installed. It came. We just look under. I don't think it's going to show up. Yeah, I don't think I have it installed. Sorry about that. But ask again on Tuesday, or if you want to send me an email, just as a brain cramp reminder. So you could then just send me, and I could send an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, so Volker Schmall just saying hi to Cubase lovers. All right. All right, so we see, hey Greg, VST is used all over the world, but did Steinberg invent it or someone else? It was invented by Steinberg, so. We see Triebwerk or Triebwerk is the German word for jet engine, so it's good to know. All right, so we see, is it possible to control several controllers in different plugins at the same time with one controller, for example, cutoff, resonance, and volume? So I think it's kind of set up to be defined as like one knob per parameter, because it could get really, I know there's creative uses of it, but there's also nightmarish support issues when people assign their controller, and I've been on the end of those support calls where someone, why is I move this another parameter adjusting, and it's, in the old days we could do it and there was a lot of issues. So it's basically set up to be, one controller, one parameter per controller. So okay. Okay, and I know we had one question that we haven't gotten to. Let me get to that real quick. Thanks for all the lovely questions, and hope everyone's learned a new tip or trick. All right, see, we're at 141 likes. Thank you very much. Okay, so the question is, hi Greg, I tried to use all the automation on Groove Agent 5 choke, but it doesn't work for me. How do I control the sustain only of the ride? And this thanks is Ari from Israel who asked. So a lot of times the choke control is actually just going to be utilized from a MIDI message. So and if you take a look at what, you can set, I think, 3 different controllers for it. We used a choke like on cymbals. So you could do like a, and kind of like you're grabbing the cymbal, cutting off the note. So let's open up a quick Groove Agent instance of, like, here we are. So now when we go to, let's find our, okay, so now as soon as we click on the cymbal, you have a choke control. So, and we could choose whether it's going to be note off, aftertouch, or poly pressure. So, and this could really depend on what MIDI controller you're using. So let's say I do a note off. So, and I hit the, I'm just going to hit, I'll open up just to kind of show this on the, let me move this down. All right. All right, so let's say we're here. All right, so now when we have it set to note off, when I hit, So as soon as I hit the note off message and let go. So now, so as soon as I hit the choke, and as soon as I let go of the MIDI note, that will kind of choke it. Now, if I want it to come over here and do aftertouch, like my controller, when I press down the key, it has a little bit of give, and this will send aftertouch. So I'm going to hit the note, and then press the key down again, because my Nektar controller has aftertouch. So if I wanted to just record this, let's say we'll solo, and I'll just record, I'll hit a note. Let me just turn off loop here real quick, sorry. All right, so I'm going to record just a note. I'm going to hit the note again a couple times. And then I'm going to hit the aftertouch now. And that will choke. So as soon as I just recorded that, if I hit record, that would be helpful. So let's say... So now when we look at the MIDI data, and we can say, now let's look at the aftertouch, we can see exactly that the aftertouch so if you choose aftertouch, you could actually just kind of draw it in as well, and just have that actual cymbal choke just from the MIDI message that you've actually just created right there. All right, and I think we got the other question answered that was mailed in. So let's jump back, see if there's more questions. Thanks for all the wonderful questions from everyone. Okay, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. Will Cubase extend the gain reduction feature of the channel strip compressors to compressors on the inserts? This would be a great feature to have. All right, so let's say if we have... all right, so let's say if we're playing this particular track and we're going to compress it. And let me just bypass the automation. All right, let me just revert it quickly, sorry. Okay, so let's say we're in our channel strip, and we go to the compressor. So let's say we do all right, so let's say if I bypass that and do the compression here. So go to my dynamics, let's go to same compressor. So I'm not sure if it's the kickback metering that you're looking for, but it really looks kind of identical between the two. So will Cubase extend the gain reduction feature of the channel strip compressors to compressors on the inserts? So I'm not sure if it's the gain reduction metering, kind of like the kickback metering. So, but let me know if that's what you are talking about, King Droopy. All right, we see Gerald Ely saying that choke control and groove agent is new to me. That's useful. So yeah, it's good for a lot of kind of different drum programming tasks. We see Michael Teams' revelation of the day, the choke. Okay, so we see from Quellen, thanks, but I saw you have the hypnotic dance. Can you show me how to get my presets back? I only get the presets. So I think hypnotic dance only works in Hallian now, that it's not going to work as a standalone. But let's see if I could just get it. So let's come over here to hypnotic dance. Seeing if it's in here. Let me look inside of Hallian Sonic SE. And let me just look in MediaBay again. Okay, so here's hypnotic dance. All right. Okay, so what I just did is just kind of reset it, and let me just see if tribe work is the same, if it's in here again. Yeah, I don't see it. All right, so say if I drag this out. Yeah, so, some of these used to work as kind of standalone instruments. But I think over the last couple versions, maybe like version 10, 9, 9.5, maybe that they had migrated to, basically they were, Hallian-based instruments that didn't play, they kind of played standalone with the different settings. So I think that their intention now is that they're kind of like a Hallian sound set. So it might have to be played from within Hallian. So. Okay, so I see from King Droopy just saying the metering on the big mixer. So yeah, it's been kind of a feature request that's been passed on, but sometimes not all insert plugins will report metering correctly. So. All right, we see Nick has to head off. All right. Thanks for joining us. All right, so Manos is just asking, hello, may I ask something about parallel compression, or is it irrelevant? So you could definitely ask away. Go ahead. John Costigan says Greg knows all. So I wish I knew more. I'm trying to learn all the time. But yeah, please go ahead and ask. We have a couple more minutes left. If not, we could wrap up just a little early, but we'll see if there's more questions. All right, so here's... Okay, so you see, I cannot understand the difference between pre and post fader using this method sometimes on drums channel, excluding overheads and room to make the mix bigger. Okay, so let's say if I'll just load up a quick drum thing that we'll do parallel compression on. All right, so a lot of times, you know, technically, if you're using, you know, some people will say that, you know, if you're using sends, that you know cannot be true parallel. But let's go ahead and I'll show you how, you know, we could set up, you know, different groups. And often what I do, so let's say I want to take, you know, my drums here. All right, so I'm going to take these drums and I want to add, I'm just going to add 2 group channels. So I'm just going to come here, let's add group channel. So let's do 2. Okay, so, you know, some people will take all their drums and route it to the groups through sends. So let's say if we come here, I'm going to activate Q-Link, so we'll send all these to group 1 and send them all to group 2. We'll turn them all on. All right, so now we're basically just doubled the sound, but so if I want to now take this and apply like a heavy compression on this one. All right, so let's say everything's now going into this group. So now if I wanted to blend this in, so let's say if we wanted to switch all these to, let's say I'll just select all my drums. So now the levels feeding group 1 are not based on the controls. So let's say if I wanted to come here, let's make all these post or make them pre-fader. So these levels that we do here don't really have an impact on the drum. So if you want to kind of keep that balance, it's probably going to be best to make it post fader. Otherwise you could kind of really not really have the same balance. So it's just going to take everything kind of at all the drums at the same level. So if you wanted to kind of blend the same levels, like you may not want the blended signal to be at, you know, a different mix than what you're actually working with. Okay. Okay, so we see a question. How can I set MIDI remote? I get no response when I want to drive an insert plugin with it. All right, so let's say I have my MIDI remote here, and I just have this set up for quick controls. So my knobs at the top of my controller now are just quick control. So I go to a plugin. So let's say, and we could switch the focus here. So we'll see that we're going to have our focus settings. So I could say track and plugin window focus. So I have, let's say I have a plugin here. We'll go to distortion. Let's get to VST bass amp. So now we could come over here to our quick controls, and now just by default I could have these 8 knobs on my controller that I'm moving. Control the different, so I'm moving quick control 1, that's going to be my volume. Quick control 2 is this knob, and we could assign these knobs. So if I go back to, I have this window, and I could assign different parameters for each of these knobs. So if I said, okay, I want this cabinet to be, I could just simply assign that and learn that quick control for different parameters. But we could also have track quick controls. So if we wanted to come here, so now when the track is in focus, I'm controlling not the plugin parameters, but I'm controlling, let me just switch this. So I'm controlling my quick controls on the plugins when that's the active window. When my track is the active window, my quick controls are controlling that. So you can have 8 knobs, which is, sorry for hitting my mic, but I could have multiple, like, 8 knobs, and, I'm controlling my volume, my panning. I click on the plugin, that's the active window. Now I'm controlling plugin parameters, and I could choose which plugin parameters are being controlled. All right, so we see, so hi Greg, when I use a channel strip compressor, I can see the gain reduction on the meter bridge, but when I use the compressor from Cubase as an insert, I can't see it. Will not, okay. So I don't think you see it, so let's say if I'm here, let's put it on my main mix. I'll just revert this, so we'll get rid of the parallel. All right, so say on my main mixer, and let's go to our mix console here. So I don't think you see the kickback meter on the meter bridge here. You may see it kind of reflected. But I don't think that that you actually see it kind of reflected, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right, so Marcus's question, is it better just to use compression on the drum mix channel or use parallel compression method, because pre-post confuses me? So again, you probably want it to set it to post if you're doing parallel. But the benefit of why you'd want to do parallel and why you'd want to do it is maybe you want the dynamics of the original drums to come through in the unaffected channel, and you want kind of the bite and depth that the compression offers and blend the two. If you just put it on, if you put a compressor on your drum bus, then everything's going to be processed through that, and you may lose some of the dynamics and the attacks that you're looking for. But you could have kind of like more of a sustained punch to the drums. So that's why people blend and kind of find that sweet spot between the two. All right. So we just see a question. Is there a way to be quick with automation? I have to click a lot when I want to draw in some automation. So yeah, I think it's pretty fast. So let's say, okay, I want to draw in automation here on this track. So let's say I'll make it a little larger, and let's say I just want to grab the line tool. So I want to do a fade in or a fade out. If you wanted to draw in with a pencil, or just use a straight line tool. And if you wanted to switch the line tool to, you know, if you're doing sine waves, you could do stuff like that, and you could adjust kind of the speed that the sine waves will go if you wanted to. So, but, you know, maybe just switch to like the line tool, you know. So a lot of people just want to draw like, you know, a fade out from this particular point. Okay, I want my automation from there, and I want to fade out. Boom, just 2 mouse clicks. All right, so we see question. Does it make any difference where I insert plugins on a control room? Above the knobs, under the knobs? So if we do above the knobs, we could have the inserts. So we go to our inserts here. So if we're in the bottom, this is everything going through the control room will be here. But if we are in the monitor section, so let's say, okay, I'm going to close this. And when we go to monitors, this way, when we do processing, each monitor could have their own, effects. So if you wanted to do correction for a specific pair of monitors that's not applied to the other, you could do it in the monitor section above. And if you wanted like room correction that was always going to be on, just go to the main area and do the inserts below. So this way, each speaker of the 4 speakers could have their own effects processor. Each Q mix could have their own inserts, and the control room globally can have their own inserts in the main area. All right, see, we can maybe get one more question. All right, we'll see if there's one more quick question that sneaks in. All right, I think we're maybe have like one more minute. We'll see if there's one more quick question sneaks in. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. Hope that everyone's learned a tip or trick. We'll be doing this again on Tuesday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. For those of us that are celebrating Halloween with families, and if you have kids, we hope you have a wonderful Halloween. I want to thank everyone for great questions, and we'll try to get, hopefully I'll have my Zoom license, and we'll aim to have the Zoom meetup perhaps next Friday. So, but I want to thank everyone for the great questions. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Thank you so much. Goodbye.